When I was growing up, my mom always used to say, whenever you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And while that's a wonderful way of remembering how the heck to spell the word, does that actually apply in poker? Let's talk about it today. Good morning, how are we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka Split Suit, and today I want to talk about assumptions and assuming in poker. This whole thing sparked from a comment that was left on the Basics of Poker EV video by Roger, and Roger says the following: "You're making a ton of assumptions about what the small blind was shoved with. This is where the entire thing falls down." So honestly, I get this kind of comment a lot, and unshockingly, I get it more on something like YouTube comments than I ever would on something like the Discord, but I still think it can be worth discussing, and while this comment was probably left in a smart-ass way, I figure I'll try to give it an earnest answer. So let's get started. So in the video that Roger is actually referring to, the situation is essentially it folds around, small blind decides to shove, and you're deciding whether or not you can call with a hand, and you're just trying to calculate the EV. And obviously in order to calculate the EV, you have to think about what your opponent's range is, that way you know what your equity is, and as such you can actually do the EV equation. So I'm not going to turn this into a whole mathematical breakdown, but it's important to understand that if you're going to do EV equations, or pretty much anything mathematical in poker, there are clearly going to be some assumptions that have to be made. So to get it out of the way, yes, we have to make assumptions in poker. It's just what's going to happen. And good poker players are going to make assumptions based upon any player pool analysis that they have, if they've accrued any specific information on a specific player. All of these things are being used to assume realistically your opponent's ranges and frequencies, and then from there you can plug those into static formulas, and then you can actually come up with an actual answer. But essentially, if you think about the assumptions you're making on things like, again, frequencies and ranges, those are essentially variables that then get plugged into the static formula. And regardless of what most non-technical poker players would tell you, assumptions really do underlie everything in poker. And like I already mentioned, most of these assumptions are going to come out to things like the range of your opponents, and advanced players are going to make more assumptions about villains' ranges and actions and how they're going to proceed throughout the hand. And if you're looking for a really good example of this, I did a recent hand history analysis that I would definitely suggest checking out, where I talked about bucketing some of the major river cards that could run off in a given situation. And while this is very difficult at first, it's the kind of thing that if you work towards it off table and in between sessions, you're going to have a better feel for it in real time. You're going to have your assumptions much stronger, and at the end of the day, that's really all you can ask for. Poker is extremely complicated, but the people that can assume better and make better decisions based upon those assumptions and the underlying technical analysis are just simply going to do better in the long term. They're going to do better in the short and midterm as well, but you really have to put in this kind of time and effort if you want to really expand your poker strategy. I promise you it will pay off dividends in the long run. And the question that I would pose here to Roger, or anyone else who feels like this about assumptions in poker, is what's the alternative? And this is a great question that you should ask yourself whenever you're analyzing strategy, be it poker strategy, be it social strategy, political strategy, anything. Ask yourself the question, what is the alternative strategy here? Simply because I assume, yep, did that one on purpose, I assume that if you're not going to look at things like small blind's range or small blind's frequencies or anything like that, then you're just looking at your own two hole cards, and you're just making a decision on whether to call here based upon whether your hole cards are pretty enough or not pretty enough. That can't possibly be correct. And if you never put in any sort of assumptive work off table, then you really would have no idea what is mathematically good versus bad versus neutral in a situation like this. And again, how can that possibly be good in the long run in a game that has so much math baked into it? And you have to understand that assuming and making better assumptions is simply a muscle, and you just have to exercise it and you will get better at it in time. But there's always going to be a spectrum of, yeah, these are really good assumptions or these are absolutely terrible assumptions, and let's be honest, most assumptions in poker are going to fall somewhere between those two things. But you will get better and better with time and practice, I promise you. But if you just completely abandon making any sort of assumptions altogether, again, how the heck are you going to end up approaching this game? And one other thing I want to repeat one more time, because I think it's really worth understanding, is let's just say that Roger's comment here was really based around the fact that he didn't like the assumptions that I was making about the small blind shoving range. Totally fair. There are lots and lots of assumptions I make in poker videos that people are like, I don't agree with that, I don't see that in my games, that doesn't apply here, I just completely think it's something else. Fine, no problem at all. Understand that those are variables, and again, what I like to teach is not just the variables and kind of where I'm coming up with them, but also the static formula. So if you look at the exact same situation that Roger commented on, let's just say you disagree with the range assumption I'm assigning for the small blind. Okay, plug in your own. Now you know what the formula is, then you can go in, make your own assumptions, then say, okay, well, I'm going to plug that number into the overall formula. Now you know both things and you're ready to rock and roll. You get the answer that's specific to you and your game. That's great. But again, if you don't assume, it's not going to happen for you. So if you're finding the value in doing this sort of work, understanding the static formula, understanding the variables at play and the assumptions and how they fit into that, I would definitely suggest picking up my Postflop workbook if you haven't already, doing a few pages per day. This is going to lay out all of the assumptive variables for you, but also you can go through a spot and say, okay, again, I disagree with that range, or I think an opponent in my game would use a different range. Plug that in instead. You have the exact formula you need for it, and you're going to get much better reps. And this is really good off-table study. Splitsuit.com/postflop to learn more, pick up your copy, or look for the Postflop workbook today on Amazon if you prefer paperbacks. And that is going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed, and if you like this kind of video, answering different YouTube comments, some good, some not so good, let me know. I'd be happy to look into doing more of this format in the future. And of course, a thumbs up if you like the video would be massively appreciated as well. Otherwise, I'll see you back shortly with a brand new video. And in the meantime, good luck out there and happy grinding.